My parents were the type that wanted me to be perfect in every way, from my grades to my social status. They never hesitated to remind me that they paid for everything in my life and that I owed them. Growing up, I always had to toe the line, never daring to do anything that would anger them. I went to the college they wanted me to, studied the degree they deemed appropriate, and even picked up a job in the same company as my father. I was living my life according to their whims, and I thought I was doing a great job of it. Until my grandfather passed away. He left me a considerable amount of inheritance, which didn't sit well with my parents. Suddenly, they were demanding that I give them the money, arguing that they had paid for my upbringing and deserved it. I was shocked and appalled, but I should have seen it coming. I was sitting in the living room, staring at the check that was now in my possession, trying to wrap my head around the situation when my parents walked in. "Give us the check, son. We need it more than you do," my father said with a straight face. "What do you mean you need it more than me? This is my inheritance, and I have every right to keep it." My mother rolled her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous. You don't know how to handle money. We're just trying to protect you from yourself. You could spend it all away on drugs or something." I glared at them. "Protect me? From what? From actually having a life outside of the one you've dictated for me. I'm done with this. I'm keeping the money." My parents didn't take kindly to my defiance. They started to make snide remarks about how ungrateful and disrespectful I was. They even went as far as to suggest that they would cut me off completely if I didn't give them the money. It was a constant battle from then on. My parents would try to guilt, trip me, or manipulate me into giving them the inheritance, but I refused to budge. I knew that this was the first step towards gaining control over my own life. The tension in the house was unbearable, and I could feel my parents' anger simmering just below the surface. They were used to getting what they wanted, and I wasn't backing down this time. One day, my father had been drinking heavily, and I could tell that he was spoiling for a fight. He cornered me in the kitchen, and before I knew it, he had grabbed me by the collar and slammed me against the wall. "Give us the damn money, you ungrateful brat!" he shouted in my face. I saw red. All of the years of pent-up frustration and anger came boiling to the surface, and I shoved him away from me. "You're not getting a cent, Dad. Get over it," I spat out, my heart racing. He lunged at me again, but this time I was ready for him. I sidestepped him and watched as he stumbled and fell to the ground, his face red with rage. "Wow, Dad, nice move. Did you learn that in anger management?" I said sarcastically, my own anger now turning into amusement. I knew at that moment that I couldn't stay in that house any longer. I couldn't continue living under their thumb, always being told what to do and how to live my life. It was time for me to take control of my own destiny. The next day, I started looking for apartments online, and within a week, I found a place that I could afford. I packed up my things and moved out of my parents' house, leaving behind all the rules and restrictions that had been holding me back for so long. At first, I was scared. I had never lived on my own before, and the thought of being responsible for everything was overwhelming. But as the days went by, I started to feel more and more empowered. I was finally able to make my own decisions and live my life on my own terms. It wasn't easy, of course. There were bills to pay, groceries to buy, and a whole host of other responsibilities that I had never even thought about before. But every time I felt overwhelmed, I reminded myself of why I had left in the first place. I had to keep moving forward no matter what. Slowly but surely, I started to build a life for myself. I made new friends, started dating, and even found a job that I loved. And every time my parents called, demanding that I give them the money, I simply hung up the phone. I had made my decision, and I was sticking to it. It was a typical Tuesday evening when I heard a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I was hesitant to answer. But when I looked through the peephole, I saw my parents standing outside. "What do you want?" I asked, my heart racing. "We need to talk, son," my father said, his voice serious. Reluctantly, I opened the door and let them inside. We sat down in the living room, and my parents wasted no time in getting to the point. "We need the money, son. We're in a tough spot right now, and we could really use your help," my mother said, her voice soft. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Hadn't we already been through this? I had made it clear that I wasn't going to give them the money. I'm sorry, but I can't help you. I have my own bills to pay, and I can't just hand over the money that my grandfather left me, I replied firmly. My parents didn't take it well. They started to raise their voices, and before I knew it, we were arguing again. It was like we were back in their house, and nothing had changed. The argument went on for what felt like hours. My parents tried every trick in the book to convince me to give them the money, from guilt, tripping me, to threatening to cut me off completely. But I refused to back down. Finally, they gave up and left. I was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. I couldn't believe that they had come to my house and demanded money again. It was like they couldn't accept that I was living my own life now. Over the next few weeks, I received several phone calls and texts from my parents and my extended family, all asking for the money. I tried to ignore them, but it was hard. They were my parents after all, and I still loved them. But eventually, I had had enough. I couldn't take the constant demands and arguments anymore. So I sent them a message, telling them that I loved them, but that I couldn't give them the money and that I'm leaving the country to go chase my dreams of traveling the world. It was a hard decision, but I knew it was the right one. I had to live my own life and make my own decisions, even if it meant going against my parents. In the end, my parents did eventually move on. They stopped calling and texting me, and we didn't talk for a while. But eventually, we were able to rebuild our relationship, even if it wasn't exactly the same as it had been before. As for me, I was proud of myself for standing up for myself and refusing to give in to their demands. It was a difficult situation, but it had taught me that sometimes you have to do what's best for you, even if it means going against the people you love. And I'm writing this from Thailand. That's where I'm living now. I woke up on a Saturday morning with the sun shining bright through my window. I was excited for the day ahead because I had planned a picnic with my friends at the park. We had been looking forward to it for weeks. I quickly got dressed, grabbed my picnic basket, and headed out the door. As I arrived at the park, I noticed a commotion near the entrance. A woman was yelling at the security guard, demanding to be let in without paying the entrance fee. I tried to ignore it and walked towards my friends, who were setting up our picnic spot. "Hey guys, sorry I'm late," I said as I approached them. "No worries, we just got here," replied my friend Sarah. "But have you seen that crazy woman over there?" I turned around to see the woman still arguing with the security guard. "Yeah, I saw her. What's her deal?" "I don't know, but she's been causing a scene for the past 15 minutes, said Sarah. Just then, the woman stormed over to our picnic area. "Excuse me, but can you move your things? This is where I always have my picnic." I was taken aback. I'm sorry, but we got here first. You can find another spot," the woman huffed. "Do you know who I am? I'm a regular here, and I always have this spot. Move your things now." I rolled my eyes. "I don't care who you are. We're not moving." The woman scowled at me. "You're being very disrespectful. My son deserves this spot more than you do. He's been looking forward to our picnic all week." I looked around and saw a young boy standing behind her, looking embarrassed. "I'm sorry, but we're not moving. We planned this picnic for weeks, and we're not going to give up our spot just because you're throwing a fit." The woman's face turned red with anger. "How dare you speak to me like that? I demand that you move your things right now." I shook my head. "No, I'm not going to argue with you anymore. We're staying here, and that's final." The woman let out a frustrated scream and lunged at me, trying to grab the picnic basket out of my hand. I quickly stepped back, narrowly avoiding her attack. "What's wrong with you?" I shouted at her. "You can't just attack people because you're not getting your way." The woman glared at me, her face twisted in rage. "You think you're so much better than me, don't you? You entitled brat." I couldn't help but laugh. "Me, entitled. Look in the mirror, lady. You're the one throwing a tantrum because you can't have what you want." The woman let out another scream and attempted to grab me again, but this time I was ready. I blocked her attack and pushed her away from me. She stumbled backward and fell to the ground. I looked down at her feeling a mixture of anger and amusement. You really need to learn how to control your temper. Maybe try some yoga or something. The woman got up, still fuming. I'm going to report you to the park authorities. You'll be banned from this park for life. I shrugged. Go ahead. I have nothing to hide. Unlike you, I actually paid to enter this park. My friends and I continued with our picnic, ignoring the woman's continued shouts and screams. As we packed up to leave, the security guard came over to us. The woman turned her attention to the security guard. You should be doing your job and not letting these entitled brats take over the park. I demand that you kick them out right now. The security guard raised his eyebrows. Ma'am, I'm afraid I can't do that. They paid their entrance fee and have just as much right to be here as you do. The woman scoffed. That's ridiculous. They're clearly causing a disturbance. I demand that you call the park manager and have them removed. The security guard sighed. Ma'am, I've already spoken to the park manager and they have given us clear instructions not to engage with you. You're causing a disturbance, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave. The woman's face turned even redder. How dare you? I demand to speak to your manager. The security guard just shook his head. I'm sorry, ma'am, but my manager is not available at the moment. You need to leave the park now. We said to ourselves, enough picnic for the day, and we were ready to leave. As we were leaving the park, we heard shouting and commotion coming from behind us. We turned around to see the entitled woman had returned and was now physically attacking the security guard. Get out of my way, you useless idiot! She yelled as she tried to push past him. The security guard was doing his best to keep her back, but she was surprisingly strong. Suddenly, the woman grabbed the security guard's shirt and pulled him towards her, getting ready to hit him. Without hesitation, the security guard pulled out a can of pepper spray and sprayed it directly in the woman's face. She screamed and stumbled back, her eyes burning and her nose running. That's what you get for attacking a security guard, the guard said calmly as he restrained her. My friends and I watched in shock as the entitled woman was handcuffed and taken away by the police. It was a crazy ending to what had started as a peaceful day in the park. After the police had taken the woman away, the security guard came over to us to make sure we were okay. We thanked him for handling the situation and asked if he needed any help. No, I'm good. Thank you for asking. Time to teach this entitled witch a lesson, he replied with a smile. I smiled to myself as I thought about how the entitled woman got what she deserved. Maybe next time she'll think twice before causing a scene in public, or maybe she will think twice of her innocent child who did nothing wrong and watched his entitled mother getting her butt kicked. It all started when I was browsing the Lego section, looking for a new set to add to my collection. That's when I saw it, the Lego Millennium Falcon. It was the perfect addition to my collection, and I couldn't wait to get my hands on it. But then, out of nowhere, this Karen appeared, dragging her screaming child behind her. She marched right up to me and demanded that I give her kid the Lego toy that I was holding. Excuse me, she said, her voice dripping with entitlement. My little angel has been asking for that toy all week. I think it's only fair that you give it to it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman was actually demanding that I give her son my toy. I tried to explain to her that I had been looking for this set for weeks and that I had finally found it. But she wouldn't listen. Look, lady, I said, trying to keep my cool. I'm not giving you my toy. If you want it, you'll have to buy your own. That's when she started to lose it. She started screaming at me and calling me all sorts of names. And then she threatened to call the store manager. I rolled my eyes. Of course she would try to get the manager involved. I stood my ground and waited for her to storm off and make a scene. But then something strange happened. The store manager appeared, and she was also a Karen. She approached us with a stern look on her face, and I knew right away that this wasn't going to end well. What seems to be the problem here? She asked, her voice cold and authoritative. This person won't give my child their toy, the entitled Karen said, pointing at me. I demand that you make them give it to me. The store manager turned to me and raised an eyebrow. Is that true? She asked. I explained the situation to her, but she wasn't interested in hearing my side of the story. She was too busy pandering to the entitled Karen and her bratty kid. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said to the Karen, "but I'm going to have to ask this person to give you the toy. It's store policy." I couldn't believe it. This was insane. I wasn't going to give up my toy just because these two Karens were throwing a fit. I stood my ground and refused to budge. That's when the entitled Karen lost it. She lunged at me and tried to snatch the toy out of my hands, but I was too quick for her. I dodged her attack and held the toy tightly to my chest. The store manager tried to intervene, but I wasn't having it. I gave her a piece of my mind and told her exactly what I thought of her and the entitled Karen. "You're both a couple of entitled Karens," I spat. "You think you can just bully people into giving you what you want. Well, I'm not going to stand for it. This is my toy, and I'm not giving it up." With that, I dropped the Lego set on the ground right in front of the Karens. They both gasped, thinking that I had just ruined the toy. The entitled Karen looked angrier than before. "Look what you've done to the toy, you little piece of crap. You ruined it." The manager, Karen, followed. "I'm afraid that you have to pay for the whole set, sir." But I knew better. I was a Lego collector, and I knew how to fix any damage that could be done. "Okay, fine. I'll pay for it." I calmly picked up the pieces and started reassembling them, ignoring the angry stares of the two Karens. As I worked, I couldn't help but notice the irony of the situation. Here I was, fixing a toy that they had been fighting over, while they stood there looking foolish. I turned to the Karens and said, "Well, that was fun, wasn't it? It's always a pleasure to be harassed by entitled Karens in a toy store." The entitled Karen glared at me and retorted, "You think you're so clever, don't you? Just because you have a stupid toy?" I shrugged and said, "Hey, it's a pretty cool toy. But I guess you wouldn't understand since you're too busy being an entitled Karen." The manager Karen interjected, "That's enough, sir. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the store." I replied, "Gladly. I don't want to be around any more Karens anyway." And as for the Lego Millennium Falcon, it was still safely in my possession, where it belonged.